And today we're focusing on what is innovation funding and are we ready for it? So I'll just go through today's format for the session. We have the next slide, please. Okay. So I'll give you an introduction to the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project, which I run. We're here to support businesses through their innovation applications. So I'll give an introduction on that initially, and then I'll be handing over to our two speakers we're lucky to have in today's session. I'm really pleased that we've got two of our bid writing coaches who are experts in the field of innovation funding who'll be sharing with you today around the types of innovation funding, and why we should apply and when we should apply. And then we'll be taking questions at the end. So please do use the chat bar and add in any questions you have throughout the session. But please note we will be picking those up at the end. But if you want to add anything in which you think about during the session, please do. Okay, next slide, please. So to give you an overview of the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project. The Innovation Grant Mentoring Project was set up at the end of last year, and it has been sponsored by New Anglia LEP and it runs across Norfolk and Suffolk. And our vision is to increase the number of successful applications to the Innovation Grant innovation funding schemes from businesses across Norfolk and Suffolk. Next slide, please. Innovation funding's there as UK businesses may be able to compete for this funding to be able to research and develop a new idea, a new process, product or service. And also the funding's there to test innovative innovation ideas to see if perhaps there's a potential for one of these new product services or processes. And you can obtain innovation funding through various different funding streams, which we'll cover later on today. But the main one in the UK is Innovate UK. These grants accelerate innovation and drive businesses investment into research and development, and it's a fantastic opportunity for businesses to grab hold of and accelerate the innovation. Next slide, please. So the project, which has been set up and it's run by Norfolk County Council, but we're supported by other innovation organisations in the region. The idea is that we're supporting you as businesses through these innovation funding workshops and webinars, through grant mentoring and also bid writing support. We have appointed expert mentors and coaches to the project, and they will help you work through those challenges and help you develop your innovation proposal, and also work with you and coach with you how to write that bid, because these bids can be quite difficult to put together, and the coaches will work with you through that. We won't write the bids for you. That has to stay with you and your company, but we'll give you the coaching on how to answer those questions, how to approach each of the questions potentially on the application form. And this expert learning will stay with your company for the long term. So it might not just be for that application which you're completing at that time, but there may be subsequent applications that you feel much more confident about approaching post this training, which we're offering for free through this project. So who's this project for? We are here to support Norfolk and Suffolk businesses, SMEs, from any industry sector. Businesses that might need support with their innovation proposal, maybe businesses that have already applied for innovation funding, but haven't been successful in the past and need a bit of a boost. But also businesses that are completely new to innovation funding and haven't gone down this route before and want perhaps always not felt confident in approaching these types of bids, but we're here to support you. So the project is really flexible. We can support businesses at any stage of their entry into innovation. So what the project offers is that we're running these mentor and bid writing workshops, as you can see on this slide, in the blue at the end. We're running a program of workshops around innovation, and this is the second one in our series. So we'll be looking to run these every couple of months, and we can update you when we'll be running those as we publish the information. And then as you work through these workshops, it may be that you feel that you want to apply for the bespoke support through the mentors and coaches. This is by application. So if you register to the project, we can talk through the application process. Those application form comes in and they're reviewed by our business panel, which is made up of experts in the field of innovation across the region. We're really lucky to be well supported by our steering group on the project. And so if you're successful for the bespoke element of the project, the bespoke support, we can offer a maximum of 20 hours of mentoring and 35 hours of bid coaching. It might be that you don't require all that amount, so we can just top up and you can use the hours as needed depending on where you're at and your experience of innovation funding. So please do get in touch with me if you're interested in innovation funding. It's something you're considering. If you get in touch with the project through our webpage, which I know my colleague Kate's put on the chat bar, and we'll also be sharing details of the webpage at the end of the presentation. If you register through the website, or if you want a bit more information, my contact details are at the end of this presentation. Get in touch. I'm happy to discuss further with you how we may be able to support you. But this is a free support to Norfolk and Suffolk businesses who would like to get involved in innovation funding. So I really do hope that we'll be hearing from you and able to help you, over the next couple of months. I'd now like to hand over to our two bid writing coaches, which we have on the project. We've got Adrian Bone and Anna Maddox, who will be focusing on the main part of the presentation today on what is innovation funding and are we ready for it. Adrian.
Good morning, everybody. As you know, I'm a bid writing coach, but my background is in innovation. I've run and funded several small startup businesses over the last 20 odd years. So I've got quite a wide range of experience in all types of funding, from loans, from venture capital through to grants. Today's discussion is going to centre around grants because I think this is an area that is a great starting place. As startups, you're looking for the best available funds and at the cheapest return to you. So I think that will be the area that we concentrate on for most of the session. Could I have the next slide, please? And the next one, please. Now, question is, what is grant funding? And grant funding, as the name implies, is a form of funding which comes from various sources that in effect is free money. You don't have to repay it. You don't have to provide guarantees for it. Now, sounds quite simple, but there are often a lot of catches with this type of funding. The majority of the problems start, if you like, that most grants require a degree of match funding. So if you are looking to get £250,000 as grant, you might in some cases have to raise another £250,000 yourself. So this can be quite difficult and create a bit of a problem for companies, especially for the larger amounts. So if I start at the smaller end of the scale, the £5,000, £10,000, £15,000 grants normally don't create too much of a problem because startups have normally got some funds available to fund it themselves. Now this would normally be in cash that they hold. However, as the amount of money required increases, the onus to have other funds available becomes greater. What this means is that invariably you will be looking to other sources to provide that funding. Now, there is, again, this very much depends on where you go and who's offering the funding as to what is acceptable in terms of the match funding part of the requirement. From what I have experienced in the past, a lot of funders will be quite happy that you have gone in for another competition or another form of funding that turns out to be a form of loan. And you will often be allowed to place that loan as collateral to your percentage that you have to put forward to get the grant. So that does open up the possibilities of getting quite a lot of funding from various different sources at reasonably cheap rates. Often loan funding from other competitions and from other sources, if it's done through government, is normally quite reasonably priced. So it makes the overall package still a very, very attractive proposition. Most of the other options are that you have to have either cash in your account or some form of collateral, be it property or stock. Now this becomes much more tricky and is not an area that is really used a lot. I've only seen it used once or twice. The main areas of match funding come from either cash that you own yourself or that you've been able to put in from friends and family or from loans. So be careful. The other aspect of this that makes this quite slightly trickier is that often the grants, and I would say normally the grants, will only be paid on receipt of invoices. In other words, you've got to start spending the money to receive any money. And this can often cause you a little bit of a problem. Now, the way this would normally work, if you've had to put up, let's take a figure of, say, you're looking for an overall funding package of 40,000 and you have been lucky enough to receive a grant which matches at 50%, which is actually quite a good rate these days. Normally it's in the 30 to 40% rate. What you will be expected to do is, as the different parts of your project come forward, you would be expected to pay for them up front with the cash that you have. You will then claim the grant back. Now, this can be, in some cases, immediately on presentation of invoice. In other cases, it can be done monthly. So you may have to be able to fund part of your expenditure for at least a month. So it's something to be taken into consideration when you're looking at these or this type of funding, to make sure that it's going to be suitable for you. As I say, there is quite a big emphasis on you providing funds. And when I talk about the percentage, I would say 30 to 40% is probably the going rate at the moment for quite a lot of the grant funding that's available. However, depending on who's providing it, it can drop to as low as 5 or 10%, and it can, in some cases, be 8. It can be more, but generally the rule of thumb is 30 to 40%. So you have got to be able to be prepared to put up quite a bit of money to fund your projects. One of the other problems, one of the other issues that is often raised is that a grant is that it is a gift, and it is in many circumstances. If you have been given a grant and you cannot prove that you've spent the money in the correct way, or there are some discrepancies between what you say you're doing and what you're actually doing, the grant can be recalled. So you have to make sure that you maintain exceptionally good books, have a clear understanding at the start of what you're going to spend the money on and to whom you're going to spend the money. You will invariably be expected to provide, if you're using outside services or buying in supplies, to be able to get at least 3 quotes and provide those to the person granting you the money. This is a very common practice, and it's can again be very difficult. There is often a situation, for example, and I've come across this myself. You're building up your business. You found people that you want to help you. For example, you have found a really good software engineer who really fits the bill. However, you come to get the grant and they ask for 3 quotes. Now, normally what I found is if you talk to the people involved and you explain the situation and you can prove that the company that you're dealing with is legitimate, they will normally be flexible enough to allow you to carry on with that person. But be prepared, this can be a tricky area, and some funders can get very sticky on providing funds to only one person. They like to see value for money as the core basis of what they're trying to do. They really do like to see that. Okay, now moving on from this area, I want to cover on my next slide, please, Kate, what the types of grant funding there are and what the restrictions and what the areas are that can be funded. Next slide, please, Kate. Right. Now, one of the problems, or one of the other interesting outcomes of this, is that there are grant funds available in all sorts of areas. It's not just one sector. So you can approach this, or excuse me a second. You will often find that with any form of funding, there will be criteria that you need to meet. So these will give you different, there's 2 factors involved in this. There will be 2 streams of which you can go at, and there'll be different criteria to meet within those streams. For example, you will be able to go and get funding for growth. That's quite a common area of funding. So it covers across the board. It enables you to get funding for pretty much any area of business, as long as you have a business that's perceived to be in a state where it's growing. So we've got past the startup. We are now in a situation where you can prove that you've actually got some traction, and you're now looking for growth. From that, you will be able to go and raise funds or grants in that sector. One of the other aspects that they always look at when you're trying to get grants is job creation. Now, again, this can be very specific. There are, for example, small amounts of funding available for very junior staff, apprentices and things like that. So now they don't amount to an awful lot, but they can be very useful if you are in a situation where you know that you are going to be taking on a lot of apprentices over the next few years. But that is very specific. It is not area specific or job specific. It is just about either creating jobs, which goes with the growth. The other areas that they look at would be things like renewal. Have you got an old building? Are you in a factory that needs refurbishing? Will that enable you to stay within the area? So, for example, if I was to say somewhere, one of the areas I'm down in the south of England, one of the sort of more deprived areas, our area is Hastings. Now, if I happen to have a factory down there and I'm looking to keep my business in that area, there will definitely be grant funding available for that, because you are renewing your the infrastructure in the area you're in. You're potentially going to create jobs, and hopefully there will be growth involved in that as well. So that is another sort of exceptionally good reason for them to fund you, and you'll get that a lot, and that applies to all around the country. But it certainly is very common in as a form of grant funding. The other areas that you can look for, going green. Anything to do with going green at the moment, there are plenty of funds available for that. Now that can be, again, let's take the factory option. You can replace your halogen lights with LEDs. You can look to reduce the carbon footprint of your production methods if you are a manufacturer. Even in offices, you'll be surprised the amount of things that you will be able to go for in terms of going green or in carbon reduction. Anything that can be proven to give you a carbon reduction will inevitably end up being attached to some form of grant. Now, these grants invariably aren't very much. We are talking in the probably maximum of about £20,000, and they'll be rated probably in the region of about 30%. So you will have to put up funds. Some of the smaller ones less so, but they're available. Other area, broadband. Now, in today's industries, broadband is an absolute essential, and bizarrely, especially in the countryside, little industrial estates that often can be on what were farms, invariably have poor broadband. So there are schemes available, again, government-backed ones, decent amount of money. Biggest problem I found with that in the past is that actually the money, although it's reasonable, it doesn't equate to the amount of money that needs to be spent to get a decent broadband service. So these broadband vouchers are very useful, but don't think that they're going to provide you with a full broadband service. They invariably won't. One of the other areas, or a couple of other areas that are left that often attract grant funding is non-mandatory training. If you are trying to upskill your staff, you will find that there are funds available. Again, what I've done is I've put together a small document which will be available after the webinar, giving you some links to some of the grants that are available and some of the areas where grants can be found. And this sort of area, like non-mandatory training, is one of those areas that you'll see that there's information about on that. This is a great area. It does help you to increase the capacity and skill sets of your staff, and it's a cheap way of improving your business. And all these things can be filtered back in. So if you're doing non-mandatory training, that will help you if you're going for a grant for growth. You are actually improving your situation throughout. Now, the one thing to remember, there are limits on funding, so be very careful that you always, if you are going for 2 or 3 different streams, make sure, because it's absolutely critical, that you tell any other funders exactly what funds you have received and from whom. Otherwise, you could get caught up in some regulatory problems, which can cause you a lot of aggravation. Lastly, one of the other things that I really like that can be ridiculously expensive is IP protection. Now, there are, you can't really get grants for IP per se, but what you can get are grants to enable what is called an IP audit. This is where an IP solicitor or a lawyer will be able to review your potential patent and give you information and validation as to whether they think it's worth pursuing. This sort of funding is normally limited at around about £5,000, maybe a little bit more. There is a degree of match funding involved in that. Can be about, I think you're normally expected to put up about 30 or 40% for this one, but it does give you a really good introduction to the IP process. It will give you access to an IP lawyer who will be able to feed you the information you need. And particularly, it will probably steer you away from frivolous IP claims, which are going to cost you a lot of money and probably not provide you with an awful lot of protection. So I found this to be one of the most sensible things that I've used in the past, and I can say hand on heart that I've been down the IP route before and spent a lot of money and wasted a lot of time. And it was only when I came across this a few years ago that I realised what an advantage it was to get some decent information about it before you get stuck into the IP route. Kate, could we go on to the next slide, please? Hopefully. Okay, well, I'll go on to my next. I know the next slide anyway. what we're the next slide is, where can you find these grants? Where are they? Where do they come from? There are multiple areas. It's almost impossible to limit where they come from. The problem is that there is no central register of where grants are. They change periodically and frequently, and different groups come, different groups go, funding streams come and go. So my advice is to generally be as open as possible and don't restrict yourself to the area you are in. There are funds available throughout the UK, and I'm going to go through a few in a second to give you some indication of where you may be able to get funds that might not necessarily be what you would describe as your first choice. Local enterprise zones, LEPs, very much like Norfolk are running at the moment, they have access to all sorts of funds. And not so much just the funds, but they have access to information about where funds are in your area. Now, I can give you an example. One of the sort of weirder funding that is available is for transport and logistics efficiency. It's called TAIL. And this is a grant fund that's available to help any business improve its logistics. And you might not necessarily fit the full criteria, but if you do, the grants can be up to £20,000, and you have to fund 40% of that. But it is a strange area, but there are a lot of businesses that are involved in the logistics industry, particularly in the central part of the UK. So those sort of funding sectors are really useful. There are grants also there's another product called iConstruct, which is for small grants, which is based in Norfolk and Suffolk, to fund a new product or development in a construction or built environment. So this invariably means rebuilding, as I talked about earlier, doing up an office. That's one of the funds that you can go to. That's relatively small, can be up to 20,000. There's another specific one to the area that I think is useful. It's called Drive. It's business mentoring for businesses in rural areas, and can lead to a grant of up to 30,000 with about 40% of projected costs. So those are just a few of the little ones that are available locally. Now, one of the areas that seems to get overlooked, if you are building a specific product. Now, let's take if you're in materials, you've got some research, you want to build a new robot, and you're not sure where to go for. Universities are a really great place to start. Most of them have programs available. Some of it's loan funded, some of it's grant funded, some aren't funded, but they will be able to point you in the direction of somebody who'll be able to help you. I think the whole thing with them is that they offer a whole new variety of funding sources. I'll give you a quick example. In Sheffield, there's a body called the AMRC, and they are Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. And they provide funds and support, really good support actually. If you've got a new product that you're unsure about the design on, unsure about the materials, they can provide you with really excellent qualified staff who will be able to help you with that aspect of it. And there is grant funding available for that. It's not huge, but at that stage, it is really useful funding to have. Down in, for example, Southampton, I know for the moment they're running quite a lot of funding to do with COVID. They have got a vaccination hub down there, and they're looking to do research into that area. So anything to do with microbes and or superbugs in particular, stopping superbugs, they've got interest in that, and they may well be able to help you down there. Leicester the same. They have got arrangements with hospitals where they can set up test rooms, and that can be part funded as well. And that's often getting testing done for products is very, very difficult. Universities are a great place to go for that. Brighton, Sussex, they have South of Essex. They've all got good projects. Always worth going to look at the innovation centres at these universities as well, because they will give you some good feedback on what's going on locally to them. Locally to them doesn't mean that because you're in Suffolk or Norfolk that you can't apply. They often want that type of business in there. Another group of people that can provide a lot of information relative to the universities is the knowledge transfer network. This is a slightly more convoluted approach. They invariably want to do joint projects, and it's really about taking on team members from universities. They can be slightly different. The universities is a very mixed bag. You can get a lot of really good research done, but you may well be expected to have to put some input in via funding or part funding, i.e. so you take your grant money and fund it with a researcher from a university to write papers. They really want to progress. So they are, I would say, often at the what are called the really sharp end, especially if you've got some new innovation which you're looking to fund. They are great to go with. Another area that, is the Green Growth Platform. This is another area. If you are developing products that you have or believe to have carbon reduction, carbon footprint reduction, anything in the green sector that you think, or if you believe your product is going to be in that area, they are really worth talking to. Again, they have grants available. It does vary with them as well, but they will be able to help you a lot in, again, meeting the right people. It's a lot of this is to do with who you contact. Green Growth Platform will be able to provide you with lots of people in that specific area and will help you a lot. And again, it goes on going on to the next one, the Manufacturers Growth Platform. If you are looking to build and design and manufacture, they are a great bunch of people to talk to. They can help you with, there is some small amount of grant funding there, again up to sort of Manufacturers Growth Platform have about, you can get up to £30,000 worth of grant funding from them, of which that works out to about £15,000. You've got to do 50% with them, but they have a lot of different projects available that will be able to help you out and really, really good. I say none of these are huge, but they add up, especially if you're a startup. These smaller ones are the ones that really help you get kick-started. I will mention Innovate because it is one of the best and biggest funders, but Anna will be dealing with them in a lot more detail than I will. Just to say that they are the biggest funder, and that's where the really big money comes from. It is also, as Anna will explain, the most complicated. County councils often have projects either running with local boards and teams that will enable you to get funding for a wide variety of things. This can be from setting up a shop, setting up a clinic, even into the arts areas, as well as business per se. I mean, all these areas can be business. I'm not trying to decry anybody's business. I'm just differentiating from what I would describe as manufacturing, production type businesses to more retail businesses. And councils are a good source of funding for that. Could we move on to the next one, please? Okay, right. In this area, in the area you're in at the moment in East Anglia, there are quite a few specialist areas that you can go to as well. B, which is the Anglia, offers free support and grants up to 20,000, and this is a specific one for carbon reduction, reducing your carbon footprint by reductions in energy and energy savings. So they will enable you to go in and replace boilers, replace heating systems. Quite a useful one. Another one that's quite useful is Kickstart, which is a scheme that provides funding to employees to hire quality job placements, but this is restricted to the 16 to 24-year-olds, and normally is based on the fact that they will be on universal credit at the time. and are at risk of long-term unemployment. So I wouldn't expect to find a lot of graduates in that area, but if you're in the manufacturing and retail, that would be a really good place to find new staff and get funding for it as well. There's also, if you're in the artistic spectrum, there are art project funds available. Again, only up to about £500, but really useful money. Arts Council is another one, if you're artistically based, that will point you in the direction of other funding sources. Yeah, moving on. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, we're not going to get the next slide at the moment. We'll have to wait a second. What I was going to come to is one of the ones that is invariably forgotten. This is R&D tax credits. Now, this isn't a grant, but it is a form of funding that is absolutely free. If you are developing, designing, building, researching anything for a new product or a new process, you should be able to receive R&D tax credits. These are reimbursements from HMRC of up to 33% of your development costs, wages and subcontractor files. So there is a lot of different things that can be included in this. Anything to do with a new product in any form can be covered by it. So you will have subcontractors, software engineers, hardware manufacturers. If you are building a new product and you've got to have prototypes made, that's all eligible costs. So it's worth bearing this in mind. You get this annually, and I will put a link in with a brochure explaining exactly how R&D tax credits work. They are quite complicated, but they're not beyond the realms of half decent director of a company. Anybody that's involved with the finance of your company should be able to put this together yourselves. Be wary of going to these companies that offer to do it all for you and want to charge you up to 20% for the privilege. This isn't complicated. It really isn't. The main requirement is to detail exactly what you've spent the money on and then put forward in a written summary a case for what you've used, for what you have been doing. And as long as your case looks to be in the I've spent the money designing a new widget and these are my costs, you will invariably get the reduction. Now, the way the funds are paid out, if your company is already profitable, you will end up with a cash rebate. If you are in the pre-profit stage or pre-revenue stage, you will actually get the money back in cash. So it's a really handy cash sum. If you've spent £100,000 last year and you can pick up £30,000 in cash, it's absolutely wonderful to have it. So please be aware that that is one of the best ways of getting money, and people so often ignore it and think they aren't covered by it. Anyway, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and hopefully if you've got any questions, please stick them on the chat and we'll cover as many as we can later on in the session. We're running a little early, but I will pass you over now, if that's okay, to Anna.
Hello everyone, thank you very much Adrian. That was really in-depth and interesting, wide, broad view of what the grant landscape. So I'm Anna Maddox. I am one of the bid writing coaches on the project. My background is I've been a bid writing consultant for the last probably more years than I'd care to mention, after a science background. So I've always focused on innovation grants for both industry, university, working with universities and charities. I'm also a qualified coach. So what I hope to be able to do with organisations is not write bids for them, but to coach them through the process so that the organisation is able to develop that in-house capability. Sort of goes back to the teaching you how to fish rather than giving you a fish, so that you've got the capability within your organisations to develop bids yourself. So what I'm going to do with you today is to have a bit of a deeper dive into some of the most common form of innovation funding, and that's the Innovate UK funding. So just if anybody can access the chat, and has anybody looked at Innovate UK funding previously? If you've got anything to say about it, I'd be interested to hear what you had to say if you pop it in the chat. And you can access the chat in the bar at the bottom of your screen that looks like a little speech bubble. So Innovate UK is part of the the UK Research and Innovation, lots of government acronyms, but it's the main source of central government funding for innovation for businesses. So under UKRI also sit the research councils. I'm slightly distracted by the chat, and somebody's asked a question, which is great. So we're going to come back to those at the end, Zane, but thank you for asking. So the research councils sit there, but iUK specifically is funding for business. And what they're aiming to do with that support is to take businesses on their journey to develop innovative ideas into commercial products. So it's not about research for research's sake, and it's not about developing new products that are functionally innovative. It's about taking interesting technology and developing them into commercial products. So it's not, a lot of people think that the focus is on the technology. It's not. The focus is really evenly split between having a market for this innovative product. They run all sorts of different competitions throughout the year. So later on in the presentation, I've got a link for you so that you can save that link and keep going back to what calls are open, and you can also set up alerts for when they bring new things out. The downside of Innovate UK is that because it's the most common, it's very, very competitive. There are a few other things that you need to take into consideration as well when you apply for funding, which Adrian has alluded to previously. But the main drawback, as far as I can tell at the moment, is that it's exceptionally competitive. Can I have the next slide, please? So what do they fund? Particularly it's innovation. There's the SMART grants, which are the most generic. They can fund any innovation for any industry, and there's usually 3 or 4 competitions each year. The call will come out. For example, one came, and then a few months later it will close, and by the time it's closed, usually within a couple of weeks, the next one's open. So you've usually got from 3 or 4 months from them saying there's an open call to it closing, and there is a really hard deadline usually at 11 o'clock in the morning where you can't get on the portal anymore, and if you haven't finished it, then you've missed it. So that's SMART grants. There's also Biomedical Catalyst, which is, there's either 1 or 2 competitions a year. They're usually every 7 to 8 months that there's a new one of those open. And they're very similar in process to SMART grants, but they are longer and they're very focused on biomedical stuff, but we'll talk a little bit more about those as well. And then there's also a range of other grant opportunities from industrial strategic challenge funds, which are usually about a particular issue that the government can see, that so it's a strategic issue for them, and they're trying to challenge organisations, businesses to innovate in that area. Industrial Energy Technology Fund, as you would imagine with energy in the title, they're about environmental issues, so reducing packaging, more efficient cars. It just depends on what the burning issues for the government are at the time. Can I have the next slide, please? I feel like Chris Whitty. Again, can you just pop into the chat if you can? Has anybody ever applied, that's here on the call, applied for a SMART grant before? Or if you haven't, anything that you'd like to share about why you haven't, what's put you off? So I'm going to take it from that the chat's quite quiet. We've got another question in there, but I'm going to take silence as probably that you haven't applied, and that's one of the things that potentially you're interested in. So there is, like I said, there's several opportunities for each year. It's a rolling project. So one closes, another one opens, but you can't absolutely guarantee that isn't going to be the last call. So if you've got a project that you think is a good project, don't rest on your laurels and assume that you will go forward. Kate's just posted a question. I'm a sole trader. Can I apply to Innovate UK? No, you must be registered as a UK company. And it's about turning innovative ideas into marketable products. So I touched on this before. So it's not enough to have innovation that's coming out of a university and you want to develop it, but you don't know what the market is for it. Even at the very early stage, you need to have some idea about where you're going to get it. What Innovate UK are trying to do with these grants is grow UK business. So make the UK more competitive, make the UK be cutting edge, but also grow organisations who are ultimately going to pay tax. It's not a repayable grant, but what they want is for the company to grow and you to pay tax and employ people and grow your organisation. The projects can last from 6 months to 3 years, so they can either be very short feasibility studies, but even at feasibility, you're developing the technology with a market in mind. I think that's the thing that's always got to be at the back of your mind. What is technical and what is the market? Project sizes, again, for the feasibility studies that are 6 months, the whole project might only be 25 grand in total spend for you. But if you're getting into the final stages of development and testing it within your markets, it might be a 36-month project that costs you 2 million. And of that spend, project size of 25 to 2 million, the grant can vary anything from 70% to 35%. As you should all be SMEs on this, the Greater Anglia project, you will be eligible at the higher end of that, but the closer you get to market, the bigger the drop in funding, because that means you've done the feasibility, you know it's likely to be a project that you can take to market, so your risk is getting lower, so the amount the government gives you is getting lower. As your SMEs, it can just be a project that you're doing on your own. You can have subcontractors, or you can work in collaboration with others. And the only way that large companies can apply is if they work in collaboration with other organisations. Another thing that you get, as well as the cash, is you get access to Innovate UK Edge partners who can offer you advice on taking your innovation to market. So you might be an expert in technology, but you've no idea how to market it. So this is where Innovate UK Edge can really help you understand what your market is and make money out of it effectively. Can I have the next slide, please? Like I said, and Adrian's alluded to, they are unbelievably competitive. Another question I've just seen in the chat was that somebody got 78%. You should get feedback. You should get quite detailed feedback, including what every assessor has given you. And so if you have applied and you haven't got feedback, go back to Innovate UK and they should be able to give that to you. But what we've found recently is that, thank you, Kate. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by the chat, even though I've asked for it. So you should be aware that before COVID, 18 months ago, these grants, if you got 75, mid-70s, I would be surprised if you didn't get funded. But I know projects that were in the low 80s last time and didn't get funded. So a pass mark, it's out of 100, was really 85 plus, just because of the sheer volume of applications. And the applications are really intensive. They take, if you think that you can get 35 hours of bid coaching support for that, it's at least as much as that again, if not more, for somebody within your organisation writing a really sound application. If you are working with subcontractors, there's a few criteria that you need to meet. These are very UK-centric grants. If you're working with subcontractors, they must be based in the UK or their costs aren't eligible. Occasionally, you can write an explanation of why you need to use a non-UK based subcontractor, but it will just drop your mark so low these days that it's just not worth it. So just solely use UK subcontractors. And your eventual sales must be exploited in the UK. So even if it's a technology you're going to license, it must come back to the UK. You've got to have a story around creation of UK jobs. Excuse me. And UK sales, because if you think about the reason that they're doing it, it's to shore up UK business and get UK tax paid, if you think about it in those terms. And even if you have a really early stage feasibility study, you must have a clear marketing strategy. It isn't enough to have good technology, and it isn't enough to have just a clear market. So I talk to people quite a lot who've got really something they think is massively innovative, but it's functional innovation. The technology behind it is quite simple. So it might be the first time that a certain technology has been used in a certain market. If there isn't enough technological risk, then you're not going to get a smart grant for it. Can I have the next slide, please? Just before we move on to Biomedical Catalyst, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the downside of smart grants. Just to reiterate what Adrian said, it is payable usually quarterly in arrears. So you do need enough working capital, enough working cash to get you through the first quarter, to spend that money, to pay your staff, pay your subcontractors and buy your materials for that first 3 months of the project. Biomedical Catalyst. Are anybody on the call in the life sciences sector? I'd be really interested to know if you are, because this one is actually very specific to life sciences, and if nobody is in life sciences, I won't go into as much detail. So it doesn't look like there are any life sciences organisations, but so I will go through this a little bit more quickly and we can go back onto Smart Awards, because I tend to find that's the one that most people are interested in. The big thing is it's not about designing catalysts, which a lot of people come to me and say, oh, I've got a catalyst. It's not about catalysts. It's about catalysing the biomedical industry. So it's about delivering delivering growth to the UK life sciences sector. And again, like Smart Awards, it's about taking new technology or services into healthcare more quickly and effectively. To provide support for academically and commercially led research development. The project sizes are a bit bigger in this thing, and the application form is correspondingly longer. There's more questions and the questions are longer. The project sizes are from $250,000 to $4 million for the early and late stage. And the projects need to be slightly longer. You can't have a 6-month project. And to be honest, if you're burning $250,000 in 6 months, it's quite high risk, and it's too high risk. The organisations must be SMEs, but they can work in partnership with a research organisation or alone. Can I have the next slide, please? So other funds that IUK supply, if you want to take a screenshot of that, or we can share this link after the meeting, that's the link to the Innovation Funding Service, and they have both IUK funded grant programs on there, but other ones that might be eligible for businesses as well. The KMPs that Adrian talked about are on there, how you access those, but also the different types of government funding, usually, as I said before, around environmental challenges, reducing packaging, carbon emissions, and the automotive industry. Can I have the next slide, please? So why would people apply for grant funding? Has anybody got any thoughts as why you would apply? Again, pop it in the chat if you've got anything burning that you'd like to talk about why you think you should apply. Not sure if nobody's willing to stick their neck out and tell me. Can I have the next slide, please? So these are some of the reasons why you might want to think about applying for grant funding. As Adrian said, it's a non-repayable cash injection into the organisation, albeit that you have to spend the cash to get the cash. It really makes you focus your attention on a project that's about driving innovation within your organisation. Particularly once you've launched your first project, it can be really tempting once you've got it, is just to focus all your attention on that. And if you're in an innovative sector, you need to keep your innovation moving all the time, and having a project that focuses purely on your second project, your second piece of innovation, can be essential to keep the momentum up within the organisation. Having a Smarter grant, because it's particularly now it's so competitive, is a real prestigious award for you. So you can go to other funders, to investors, and say, the government thinks this is a good idea. Can you give me some money too? You get the support from Innovate UK Edge to get your product to market, and don't underestimate how important that is to your business to focus not only on the technology but drive that market forward. It's about reducing the risk. If you can see a great technical innovation that could really solve an issue in your particular industry, excuse me, but it's really high risk, it can turn the gearing down on that risk for you. And that's one of the reasons the government wants to give you the money. They want you to take that risk, and they want you to turn it down. So if you can see this innovation and you think it's too risky, that's what the product is, the funding is there for. And when you as part of the funding, you have to write a risk, you have to do your risk assessment, do a risk register. And if everything in that risk register is low risk, that will mark you down. You need an element of risk to get the funding. Don't be tempted just to say, oh yes, it's fine. It isn't. That's what the funding is there. And ultimately, having innovative products gives you the competitive edge over your in your market. Please may I have the next slide. So you've got an innovative idea. How do you know if you're ready to apply for funding? Anybody got any thoughts on that, if they want to pop it into the chat? No? Okay, can we have the next slide and we'll talk about it. So the first thing is you've got an innovative idea to develop a new product. Medium to high level of risk due to the stage of development. As I said, as you get closer to market, the level of funding from the government drops, but the funding is there to turn the risk down if possible. But this technology has got to be able to become a viable product. I know that I'm banging on about this quite a lot, but it's not enough just to have a good market or just to have good technology. It's got to be a really interesting piece of research that you know could solve an issue in your market and that there is a market there for it. Before you're even ready to apply, you need to be able to articulate the market. One of the questions that many people fall down on is they've not done their market research. There's no point in you investing the money or the government investing the money unless you know that that there is a market there for it if you can get the technology to work. So you need to be able to articulate that market into a well thought out business plan. Know what markets you're going into, what the segmentation is, who your competitors are, and what you will do to make that business plan a reality. There's no point in applying if you've got an innovative idea, but you're just following the money. I talk to so many organisations that can say, well, what can I do? We make widgets for farming, but there's this money and I want to access it. It's a lot of hard work to get the grant. It's a lot of hard work to maintain the grant and run the project. Like Adrian said before, you need to keep records. If you need to keep timesheets, particularly if your staff are working part on the project and part on other things, you need to keep timesheets and account for every minute that everybody's spending on the project. So though it is a cash injection that you don't have to repay, it's not without a financial cost or a time cost to the organisation. And if it takes you away from what your core business is, I would say don't do it. And again, I'm going to really hone in on this. It must be technical innovation and not functional innovation. So if you've got an interesting piece of software that will make it easier for your customers or easier for your production process and it's about rearranging bits of software, that isn't technologically difficult enough. It will absolutely revolutionise your business. So it's great functional innovation, but unless it's technically difficult, it's not good enough. And one of the things that we could do if we had a chat is talk about whether the innovation is in the right place for you to go for it. It is, like I said, it's really competitive at the moment. So unless you've got all these pieces in place, it's not worth putting the time and effort into the application at this stage. Next slide. I think we're nearly at the end. Yeah, that's all the information I had for you at the moment. And I think I'm going to hand back to Laura now to go for any questions.
Thanks, Anna. That's really interesting to hear from Anna and Adrian today. Thanks ever so much. It's really in-depth information on innovation funding there. So we thought we'd spend the next part of this webinar covering any questions that anybody might have and I'm really hoping we might have some questions in the chat bar. Please do go onto the speech bubble and add in any questions you might have, and I would be really keen to try and help you with anything relating to the innovation funding. So just give you a few moments to do that. If you'll see on this slide where I spoke about the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project and the support service we're running for Norfolk and Suffolk businesses who are interested in innovation funding, you'll see here the link to the webpage where you can find out more information or register to the project. And there's also our email address. Please feel free to email and to find out more information about how we may be able to support you. I'll just give you a few minutes. We'd really like to hear from everyone involved in the chat today. Obviously, it's a bit strange doing the webinars, but it just makes it a bit more personable if we can get some questions coming through and help you directly with your innovation questions. It's a question there from Ian. I can just answer quickly. Yes, so you've contacted New Anglia, and you do I also have to register with you for more mentoring? Yes, this project is run separately. It's run by Norfolk County Council, sponsored by New Anglia LEP, but we're running the project. If you'd like support on innovation funding, then please go to the link. We can also put that link in the chat bar and register. You'll find out more information there and be able to register to this particular project for support on innovation funding. Okay, I'll just give you a couple more moments to add any questions you might have, then we'll start going through those. Okay, just to start going through some of the questions, please feel free to add some more in as we're discussing. A question for Adrian: is there a green growth platform link in Norfolk?
I know there's one down in Brighton. I've got a feeling that they are being rolled out in other counties. I am not sure if there's one specifically in Norfolk. I'll have to check, but I will make sure that the information gets back to you this afternoon.
Thank you. We can add that information onto the email we'll be sending post this presentation, and we'll be circulating this presentation recording along with the slides, which I'm sure will be a helpful reference to all those on the webinar. I've got a question for Anna now, please. So this question's from Zone Visdora. Innovate UK and other funding opportunities. What routes are there for larger businesses to apply or collaborate on local projects?
So large businesses can apply for smart grants if they work in collaboration, either with the university or with SMEs or a combination of the two. They can also apply for Biomedical Catalyst but they can't receive funding. They can be part of the project collaboration. I don't know. Does the project do a sort of matchmaking service at all, Laura?
Yes, we can do.
Yeah, so it might be worth talking to Laura or talking to people on the project to see if there are local organisations that that would meet your needs and that you can work with in collaboration with. But it does have to be a partnership. You can't use them as subcontractors, and the more SME growth that can be created, the more points you'll score.
Yeah, just to add on there, we can, through the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project, we're really lucky, we're well supported, as I mentioned, by local innovation organisations and business organisations in the region. So we're working with the universities, University of Suffolk, the UEA. We're also working with obviously Norfolk County Council and Suffolk County Council, and also involved in our steering group, we've got Innovate UK Edge, KTN. And then we've also got obviously New Anglia LEP as sponsors of the project, alongside the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor. So within, and also Mentor and HEPL Innovation, through all those different types of organisations involved in our steering group, I'm sure that we can ask about potentially links to for collaborations if required. So please get in touch to the project, and then we'll talk about how we can support you. Okay, just going on to the next question. I know we covered the question there from Kate about her husband getting 78% but no feedback. I think that was down to the fact that it was probably the first funding session after COVID-19 back in March, April time last year. We've got a question about, I'm writing a new software to streamline my production process. Can I get funding for it? Anna, is that something you'd be able to help us with?
Yeah, so probably not. It would depend if it's purely just using the software to improve your own production process. It's unlikely to be technologically difficult enough for it. I'm happy to have a conversation with people and really dig that out. But that functional improvement of something that's within your own business that you're not going to make a sale from is much harder to get funding for. But I'd need a proper conversation to understand exactly what you wanted to do.
Okay, go back to that person. Thank you. I've got a further question for, I think maybe Adrian, but well, is there anywhere I can go for support with functional technology, existing technology, but in a new field? Or is this not regarded as innovation at all?
It can be regarded as a new field. It just depends what area it is. Without more information, it's a bit difficult to tell. If you've got some technology that you're going to move into a new field, which could end up as a new product, then potentially there would be funding. But to know where that funding would come from, I'd need to know more about what the product was. Sorry, I can't be a bit more specific. It's a bit of an open-ended question, unfortunately.
If they want to add any more information into the chat bar, then please do, and we'll try and help you.
If they want to send it privately.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. We have the email address on the screen for which, and I can forward any questions on which I'm not able to answer to either of our coaches, Anna and Adrian. So yeah, please email any information over which any questions over you may want to speak to us about privately after the session, and we'll see if we can support. Adrian, probably another question for you, I think. Are there any sources of funding for market research if it's a new area to a business?
Not sure. I've seen funding for market research in relation to other grants. So for example, I recently managed to get funding for somebody via one of the innovation centres, where they had a small fund called Brain, which was enabling them to provide market research, but it was via the innovation centre itself. So they did the market research. and that was then used in an application for a smart grant. So I'm not sure whether you can get just market research funding per se, just for market research. I think it would probably be outside the remit of most grants, but you can get it if you are using that research to apply for one of the smart grants.
Okay, thank you. Adrian, while you're just another question. Adrian mentioned a number of specific grant schemes. Can you confirm that these grants will be included in Adrian's document mentioned in the talk?
Yes, I'll put in as many as I can. There are lots. I think it's a case of giving you a bigger selection as I could put together at the moment, but then you have to go and hunt around for the. To be honest, it's very difficult, as I think I said in my talk, it's very difficult to keep up with them. They pop up all over the place, and you've really just got to be very aggressive about how you try to find them.
And there's new competitions coming up all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. So what you might be able to find something which works with your innovation this month, but maybe in a couple of months' time, it's worth scanning the market and seeing if there's any other, or getting in touch with us as well. We can support on that. So if you're registered to the scheme, to the Innovation Grant Mentoring Scheme, we can. We've got experts that are scanning the horizon on innovation funding, and we can, if we obviously know a bit about your business, if you register to the programme, we can then link you into appropriate funding calls, which would work with your business. Okay, just check for any questions. Adrian, do you have any further points to add about IP protection? You said you can waste a lot of information, a lot of time sort of looking through that, but can you give any generic pointers as to how you might be able to test if you have a possible IP?
Well, so the best thing I've come across so far is this IP Audit, which is a grant-funded scheme. It enables you to go to an IP lawyer and you put your proposal to them, and they will go and do the basic research. So they will, without spending tens of thousands of pounds, which you can do, they will be able to go and say, no, okay, this product or this new technology is going to be viable or has the potential to get IP. So therefore, it may be worth following. Now, it will cost you a little bit of money. I think that I've just got to recall. I think the figure that I was quoted, I think it was I think it was actually £6,000 is the overall package, of which you get 50%. So for £3,000, you can put in quite a lot of IP. If you've got 4 or 5 different patents, you can put it all into the same audit for your company, and they will just do a review. You get a written document back saying that these ones are viable, these are not. So at least it enables you to make a sensible decision about the process before committing what can be tens of thousands of pounds to IP that you might not get. And most of the IP lawyers that I've seen that have been involved in any of these schemes have been really good and aren't the ones who just want to charge you £300 or £400 a minute. They are actually reasonably reasonable, and they're there to actually try and help, which is nice. They can often be found. You can get pretty good IP lawyers via the innovation centres that most universities have, or a lot of the universities have. They often have pretty good teams in there to give you some useful information.
Thank you. Thank you to Sophie from Net Matters putting a couple of questions on the chat. We'll just cover those now. So I don't know, Adrian and Anna, I'll read the question out, and then perhaps you could just see if you can help with this. We're currently running a program called SCS, developing the unemployed people who are on the government funding, such as income support, etc., to become web developers, which there is a shortage of in East Anglia. Assisting those on the course find employment, be it within the company or with us or any of our clients and suppliers. Would any of these grants be suitable to assist with the cost of running this, or could you advise of any that we should be looking at?
one of the schemes I mentioned early on was for to support employing young staff who are unemployed. It's run by, I'll just get the details up. I just want to make sure I'm telling you the right one. Don't want to make a mistake. The Kickstart Program, and that basically is for 16 to 24-year-olds that have been in unemployed or in long-term or on universal credit. Now, if you are specifically training them, I think you may well. See that's normally geared to people taking them on permanently. But if you are going to be effectively employing them as apprentices, which is part of their training, and they are going to be there for a fixed period of time, whether it's a year or 2 years, you may well find that scheme will help. Certainly, they would be able to advise you on whether you meet their criteria. It's a bit tricky because you're sort of in between the two. You're not employing them directly to work for you in the long term. You're employing them to train to be employed elsewhere. So I'm not quite sure if you fit the bill, but you might do. It would certainly be worth approaching them.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, so Kate has just mentioned that there's a Kickstart link higher up in the chat bar. So please go to that, or we can put that link on our email, which we're sending out post this presentation. Sophie, you've also asked another question about what grants are available for skills development. The majority of candidates on the course are in receipt of benefits and are sourced from local councils. I don't know if you've got any other suggestions and any other routes, Adrian. I know you're expert in all the different funding options out there. Is there anything else you'd suggest other than the Kickstart on this one for skills?
I would go and approach the local councils. They're often very keen to keep people in work. Training as well. There may well be some funding locally. I'm not sure what particularly you've got up in Norfolk, but certainly that would be my first port of call. Prince's Trust also can provide funding for schemes, especially if they're going into, say, rural environments. So they're being trained as woodworkers or anything in that area. They can often provide some funding for that.
Okay, I will have a chat to a couple of my colleagues, and if there's anything I can do to support on that through Norfolk County Council, I can put that again in the email. Or if Sophie, you want to send me your email address to the ConDev email on the screen there, I'll reply to you directly on that. So Sophie's just added in that we've already been awarded the Prince's Trust Award. This will help us further with funding. That's fantastic. But Sophie, if we can support you in any other way, just perhaps ping me an email, and I'll see if I can link you with anyone else at Norfolk County Council who may be able to answer that question directly. Okay, just are there any other further questions from anybody? Please keep any questions coming. We've got a little while longer which we can answer questions, but if you'd rather contact us directly, then please use those details on the screen and we can help you after this presentation. And just see there might be a couple of messages coming through, so I'll just hold on for those. Fantastic. So Zane, Sophie's put on a message to Sophie there about something which may be able to support you. So that's really interesting. Thanks, thanks for that. So just distracted and reading the chat bar. Thank you, Kate. You've just added in, will there be any webinars to help start writing an application, i.e. when you have a blank sheet of paper in front of you? Any generic webinars? Well, as I've said, this is our second innovation funding webinar, which we're running on the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project. We've got a programme of sessions coming up throughout the rest of the year. Our next one we're planning on running towards the back end of September, so I'll publish information on that. But yes, definitely we need to run a session around that blank sheet of paper, top tips for bid writing. That is on the list of for the programme going forward, and I'll keep everyone posted on. We'll be promoting these sessions through our partners, through LinkedIn and Twitter. So hopefully you'll come across them there, or if you've ticked the box to accept emails on further promotion from this from the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project, I will keep you posted directly as we confirm the details of the sessions later in the year. Just another further question from Sophie. Any tips on being a successful applicant for grants? Anna, is there anything you can add to the presentation you've already done today around that?
Well, there's probably a 2-hour webinar on the top tips, but make sure you fit the criteria of the whatever grant it is that you're applying for. Things are so competitive at the moment. Don't try and squeeze something that's not quite right into it, because it's just not worth the time and effort that it will take you. And if you do if you think you've got a good fit for a scheme, make sure you read the questions and answer the questions. Don't think, oh well, I need to tell them about this, I'll put that there. It's a bit like an exam. Read the question and answer the question in the right number of words in the right box.
Absolutely. Eligibility is so important on these competitions, and it's fantastic that this service, the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project, is able to work with businesses in Norfolk and Suffolk to check things like that. So if you're a little unsure as to whether you might be eligible and you don't want to waste all those hours, which obviously Anna went through, it takes to complete an application form, do get in touch with us. We can check that eligibility with you with our coaches, and we can also reach out to some of the experts in the field of innovation through our project if we need to ask any further advice, and we can then coach you if required, if you need that skill boost on how to approach that application form. But yes, and we'll also be running a workshop around top tips for bid writing, as we said earlier. There's a further question there. Does anyone on the webinar know of any reputable company offering courses on grant funding and bid writing? Just been added into the chat. I'm sure there are courses out there, but so you can get the support from this project around that. So please do get in contact with us and put an application in, and we'll see if we can support you. Okay. I'm not sure if there'll be any further questions coming through today. We've finished a little bit earlier, but as I said earlier, if we're happy to take any questions separately. So if you'd like to email any questions through to the EconDev email address on the screen, or register your interest in the Innovation Grant Mentoring Project, please go to that link. Thank you ever so much for joining us today, and a big thank you to Anna and Adrian for sharing your expertise around innovation funding with us today. Anna and Adrian, we're really lucky to have them on the project as coaches. So if you were to register the project and be successful for support, then you could link up with some of the experts, such as Anna and Adrian, to support you in your innovation funding process to application. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day, and if you have any questions, as I said, please get in touch. Thank you. Bye.